When you're staring at a laptop spec sheet and trying to decide whether to spend a chunk of your budget on a mobile workstation, the first feeling is usually a mix of excitement and doubt. You wonder if the machine will actually handle the heavy CAD files, video timelines, or AI model training you need, or if you'll end up with a pricey slab of metal that still feels like you're compromising somewhere. That hesitation is real, especially when the price tag pushes you into "is this really worth it" territory. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. In this review, I'm going to walk through what it's like to run a day with the HP ZBook 8 G1i, point out the moments where it truly shines, and flag the scenarios where you might be better off looking elsewhere. Let's start with the basics that matter when you actually open the lid and start working. The ZBook 8 G1i is a 14-inch workstation with a 2.5K 2560160 display that refreshes at 120 Hz. That extra pixel density gives you more screen real estate for detailed design work, and the higher refresh rate makes cursor movement feel smoother when you're scrubbing through a video timeline or rotating a 3D model. In practice, the difference is subtle but noticeable compared to a standard 60 Hz laptop. There's less perceived lag, especially when you pair it with the Intel Core Ultra 9285H and the vPro technology that's built for business environments. The machine ships with 64 GB of RAM and a 1 TB PCIe SSD. For most professionals, that amount of memory means you can keep a dozen heavy applications open. Think Adobe Premiere, Autodesk Revit, and a couple of virtual machines without watching the system swap to disk. I've tried a typical workflow where I have a 4K video project in Premiere, a large BIM model in Revit, and a Python notebook running a small AI inference loop. The SSD's read/write speeds keep file loads snappy, and the RAM headroom prevents the dreaded out-of-memory warnings that can halt a project midday. If your day-to-day work revolves around juggling large datasets or multi-application pipelines, that combination is where the value truly shows up. Now, the things that can trip up a buyer who isn't looking closely enough. First, the Core Ultra 9285H is a powerful chip, but it's built on a newer architecture that leans heavily on integrated graphics rather than a discrete GPU. For tasks that rely on CUDA cores or dedicated GPU acceleration like deep learning model training that expects an NVIDIA card, the ZBook 8 may feel underpowered. You can still get decent acceleration from the integrated Iris-Say graphics, especially for video encoding and light 3D work, but you won't see the same performance as a workstation with an RTX series GPU. If your primary workload is GPU-intensive rendering, you'll probably want a machine that explicitly lists a dedicated GPU. Another practical consideration is the keyboard layout. The English language keyboard is full-size, but the keys are shallow and have a relatively short travel distance. For long typing sessions, some users find the feel a bit mushy, especially compared to mechanical keys that many developers prefer. It's not a deal-breaker if you're comfortable with a low-profile design, but it's something to test in a store if you type a lot of code or documentation. Port selection on the ZBook 8 is fairly generous. For a 14-inch chassis, you get 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports, an HDMI 2.1 output, a full-size SD card reader, and a USB-C combo that supports power delivery. In my setup, the Thunderbolt ports let me dock the laptop to a 27-inch 4K monitor while still feeding power and external GPU enclosures if I ever need that extra boost. The HDMI output, however, caps at 4K at 60 Hz, so you won't get the 120 Hz experience on an external display unless you go through Thunderbolt. That's a minor limitation unless you already own a 120 Hz external panel. Battery life is another real-world metric that people often overlook when the focus is on raw performance. The ZBook 8's 70 wh battery gives you roughly 6 to 7 hours of mixed-usage email, spreadsheets, occasional video playback, but once you start rendering a 4K timeline or running a heavy simulation, the draw spikes and you're looking at 2 to 3 hours before you need to plug back in. If you plan to be away from power outlets for an entire day, you'll need to budget for an external charger or accept more frequent pauses. Who should walk away with this machine? The answer is fairly narrow but clear. If you're a freelance designer, video editor, or architect who needs a portable workstation that can juggle large files, run multiple professional apps, and still look good on the road, the ZBook 8 hits a sweet spot. The high-resolution, high-refresh display makes detailed visual work less straining, and the 64 GB of RAM eliminates the need for constant task switching to free up memory. The vPro technology adds remote manageability, which is a plus for IT-managed environments or consultants who need to support machines remotely. On the flip side, if you're a gamer, a deep learning researcher who depends on CUDA acceleration, or a user who lives